Abandoned baby and police dog video goes viral. The full story will amaze you. Within 24 hours, Rex and Lucy was trending worldwide. The video of a massive German shepherd gently protecting a tiny hospital patient had captured hearts from Chicago to Tokyo. But behind those viral images lay a story so powerful, so heart-wrenching, and ultimately so inspiring that it would change how an entire city understood the meaning of family, forgiveness, and second chances. This wasn't just another feel-good animal story. This was the real-life tale of a police dog whose extraordinary intuition saved a freezing child, prevented a suicide, and reunited a family that had been torn apart by circumstances no parent should ever face. You've seen the headlines, you've watched the news clips, but you haven't heard the whole story. The desperate choices that led to that snowy night. The miraculous bond that formed between a traumatized child and her four-legged guardian, and the community-wide response that proved humanity still believes in the power of love over judgment. Get ready to meet Rex, Lucy, and Sarah, three souls who found each other in their darkest hour and created something so beautiful that it inspired millions around the world to believe in second chances again. The bitter Chicago wind cut through the night like a frozen blade, carrying with it the promise of one of the harshest winter storms the city had seen in years. Officer Michael Johnson pulled his collar higher against his neck as he stepped out of the precinct, his breath forming small clouds that dissipated quickly in the sub-zero air. The digital thermometer outside the station read -10 degrees Fahrenheit, and the Weather Service had issued warnings about the dangerous wind chill that could drop temperatures to life-threatening levels. "Come on, Rex," Johnson called softly to his partner, who was already waiting by their patrol car with the patient discipline that had made him legendary among the Chicago Police Department's K-9 unit. Rex was a magnificent German shepherd, 5 years old and in his prime, with a coat of rich golden brown and black that seemed to shimmer even under the harsh fluorescent lights of the parking lot. His intelligent amber eyes held a depth that never ceased to amaze Johnson, eyes that had seen too much in their years together, yet somehow retained a gentleness that made children gravitate toward him like metal to a magnet. Standing at attention, Rex's ears were perfectly erect, constantly swiveling to catch every sound in their environment. His muscular frame spoke of strength and agility, but it was his heart that truly set him apart from other police dogs. "Another cold one, buddy," Johnson murmured as he opened the specially designed rear compartment of their patrol car. Rex leaped in with fluid grace, settling immediately into his designated space with the professionalism that came from years of training and partnership. As Johnson slid into the driver's seat, he couldn't help but smile at his reflection in the rearview mirror. 8 years on these streets had etched lines around his eyes and streaked his dark hair with premature gray. But they had also given him something invaluable, an intimate knowledge of every corner, every alley, every soul who called this part of Chicago home. He knew which buildings housed families struggling to make ends meet, which corners attracted troubled youth, and which elderly residents might need a wellness check during harsh weather like this. The radio crackled to life as they began their patrol route. "Unit 47, this is dispatch. We've got reports of increased homeless activity near the underpass areas due to the weather. Please conduct extra welfare checks tonight." "Copy that, dispatch. Unit 47 beginning extended patrol of vulnerable areas," Johnson responded, his voice carrying the weight of responsibility he felt for every person in his district. As they drove through the increasingly empty streets, Johnson noticed something unusual about Rex's behavior. Typically, his partner would settle into a relaxed but alert state during their patrols, conserving energy while remaining ready for action. Tonight was different. Rex was restless, constantly shifting positions, his nose pressed against the reinforced window, sniffing intently at the air that managed to seep through the vehicle's ventilation system. "What's got you so worked up tonight, boy?" Johnson asked, glancing back at Rex through the partition. The dog's ears were in constant motion, swiveling toward sounds that Johnson couldn't detect over the howling wind. Rex's breathing was slightly elevated, and his dark eyes held an intensity that Johnson had learned to respect over their 5-year partnership. The snow was falling more heavily now, thick flakes that seemed to absorb the light from the street lamps and create an almost dreamlike quality to the world around them. The few people brave enough to venture outside moved quickly, hunched against the wind, seeking the warmth and safety of indoor spaces. Johnson had lived in Chicago his entire life, but nights like this still took his breath away with their raw, unforgiving power. Rex suddenly stood up in his compartment, pressing his nose more firmly against the window and emitting a low whine that Johnson had never heard before. It wasn't the excited whine that preceded finding drugs or weapons during a search. This sound carried something else entirely. Concern? Urgency? Johnson couldn't quite place it, but after 5 years of partnership, he had learned that Rex's instincts were often superior to human logic. "Easy, Rex. We'll make our rounds. Whatever's got your attention, we'll find it," Johnson promised, his own alertness heightening in response to his partner's unusual behavior. The streets seemed to stretch endlessly before them, each block presenting new challenges as the storm intensified. Johnson drove slowly, his headlights cutting through the swirling snow as he scanned for anyone who might need assistance. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. In weather like this, a single mistake, a missed sign, could mean the difference between life and death for someone seeking shelter in this unforgiving urban wilderness. By 11 p.m., the storm had transformed Chicago into an alien landscape. Snowdrifts were beginning to form against buildings and abandoned vehicles, and the wind howled with a ferocity that seemed almost alive. Johnson had completed 2 circuits of his assigned patrol area, stopping to check on 3 homeless camps and ensuring that the occupants had adequate protection from the elements. Each time, Rex had remained alert but controllable until now. As they approached the overpass near Ashland and Division, Rex suddenly erupted into action. The normally disciplined police dog began barking with an urgency that Johnson had never witnessed, pawing at the partition that separated them and spinning in tight circles within his compartment. "Rex, what is it, boy?" Johnson pulled the patrol car to a stop, his heart rate accelerating in response to his partner's obvious distress. In 5 years, Rex had never displayed this level of agitation without cause. Johnson opened Rex's compartment, and the dog immediately leaped out, not waiting for the formal release command that was part of their standard protocol. Rex bounded through the ankle-deep snow toward a collection of cardboard boxes and debris that had accumulated against the concrete support pillars of the overpass. To Johnson's eyes, it looked like typical urban detritus, the kind of makeshift shelter that homeless individuals often constructed to block the wind. "Rex, heel!" Johnson called, but his partner ignored the command entirely, something that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. Instead, Rex began digging frantically at what appeared to be a pile of snow-covered cardboard, his powerful paws working with desperate efficiency. Johnson's first thought was that Rex had detected a stray animal, perhaps a cat or dog that had sought shelter and become trapped by the accumulating snow. He approached with his flashlight drawn, calling out, "Hello? Anyone there? This is Chicago PD conducting a welfare check." But as Rex continued his frantic digging, Johnson began to hear something that made his blood freeze in his veins. It was faint at first, almost indistinguishable from the wind, but unmistakably human, a weak, intermittent crying that seemed to come from beneath the cardboard and snow. "Oh God," Johnson whispered, dropping to his knees beside Rex and adding his hands to the excavation effort. Together they worked to clear away the makeshift covering, and what Johnson saw in the beam of his flashlight would haunt him for the rest of his life. A tiny figure in a pink winter coat, so small that she could barely be distinguished from the cardboard around her. Her Little face was pale beyond description, her lips tinged with the dangerous blue that indicated severe hypothermia. She was barely breathing, each exhale creating the faintest puff of vapor in the frigid air. Her small hands were tucked into the sleeves of her coat, and her legs were drawn up against her body in an instinctive attempt to preserve warmth. Johnson's professional training kicked in immediately, but underneath his calm exterior, his heart was breaking. This child, she couldn't be more than 3 years old, was the same age as his own daughter, Emma. The thought of Emma alone in the cold like this sent a surge of protective fury through him that he struggled to contain. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need an ambulance immediately at Ashland and Division, under the overpass. We have a child, approximately 3 years old, severe hypothermia, unconscious but breathing," Johnson radioed, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. Rex, meanwhile, had positioned himself next to the little girl with an instinct that transcended his training. Without being commanded, the German shepherd carefully lay down beside her, curling his warm body around her tiny form, while being careful not to put any weight on her fragile frame. His thick coat created an immediate barrier against the wind, and Johnson could see the child's breathing becoming slightly more regular as Rex's body heat began to provide the warmth she so desperately needed. "Good boy, Rex. That's it. Keep her warm," Johnson murmured, his voice thick with emotion, as he carefully checked the child's pulse and breathing. She was alive, but barely. Her pulse was weak and irregular, her skin was dangerously cold to the touch, and she showed all the signs of prolonged exposure to the elements. As Johnson worked to stabilize the child while they waited for the ambulance, Rex never moved from his position. The dog's dark eyes were fixed on the little girl's face, and Johnson could swear he saw something almost human in Rex's expression, a fierce protectiveness that went beyond any training they had received. This wasn't just a police dog doing his job. This was a guardian angel in the form of a German shepherd, determined that this innocent child would not suffer alone in the dark. The approaching sound of sirens cut through the wind, but Johnson barely heard them. His entire focus was on the miracle before him, a little girl who had somehow survived a night that could have killed her, and his partner who had found her when no human would have thought to look. The paramedics worked with swift efficiency, their practiced hands gentle as they transferred the little girl from Rex's protective embrace to a specialized hypothermia blanket. Johnson watched as they checked her vital signs, started an IV line, and began the delicate process, never leaving the child's face. "She's stable, but we need to get her to Chicago General immediately," the lead paramedic, a veteran named Rodriguez, told Johnson. "Another hour out here and—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood how close this had been. As the paramedics prepared to transport the child, Johnson began a careful examination of the makeshift shelter where Rex had found her. Using his flashlight, he carefully moved aside cardboard and debris, looking for any clues that might help identify the child or explain how she had come to be alone in such a dangerous situation. It was then that he found it, a piece of paper, folded carefully and tucked inside a small plastic bag to protect it from the elements. Johnson's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded what was clearly a handwritten note, written in blue ink on lined paper that looked like it had been torn from a child's notebook. The words, written in shaky handwriting, hit Johnson like a physical blow. "Please save my child. I can't provide for her anymore. Her name is Lucy. She loves dogs and singing. Please give her the love I couldn't." Johnson read the note 3 times, each reading adding another layer of complexity to his emotions. His first instinct was anger, What kind of parent abandons a 3-year-old child in sub-zero temperatures? But as he looked at the careful way the note had been protected, at the obvious love behind the words, "She loves dogs and singing," at the desperate plea for someone to provide what the writer felt they could not, Johnson began to understand that this wasn't abandonment born of cruelty, but of desperation so profound that a parent felt they had no other choice. "Her name is Lucy," Johnson said softly to Rex, who had positioned himself at the rear of the ambulance and was clearly reluctant to let the child out of his sight. "And she loves dogs." As if understanding every word, Rex's tail gave the slightest wag, the first sign of anything other than intense concern that Johnson had seen from his partner since the discovery. The ride to Chicago General Hospital was unlike anything Johnson had experienced in his 8 years of police work. Normally, he would have stayed at the scene to secure the area and begin his investigation. But Rex had made it clear, through body language that was unmistakable, that he was not leaving Lucy's side. When Johnson tried to guide Rex away from the ambulance, the dog had actually resisted, something that was completely unprecedented in their partnership. "It's okay," Rodriguez had said, noting the unusual bond that had already formed. "Given the circumstances and his training, we can make an exception. Sometimes animals know things we don't." During the ride, Johnson watched in amazement as Rex seemed to monitor Lucy's condition with the attention of a trained medical professional. When her breathing became labored, Rex would whine softly, alerting the paramedics. When her small hand slipped from beneath the warming blankets, Rex would gently nose it back into place. It was as if the dog understood that this tiny human was now his responsibility, and he was taking that responsibility with the full weight of his considerable heart. At the hospital, Dr. Elena Martinez, the attending pediatrician, took one look at Lucy's condition and immediately began coordinating her care. Dr. Martinez had been working in pediatric emergency medicine for 15 years, but even she paused when she saw the massive German shepherd who refused to be separated from the little patient. "This is highly irregular," she said to Johnson, but her expression softened as she watched Rex position himself beside Lucy's hospital bed with the gentleness of a mother with her newborn. "But given the circumstances of how she was found and the apparent bond that's formed, I think we can make an exception." As the medical team worked to stabilize Lucy's condition, Johnson found himself studying Rex's behavior with new eyes. This wasn't just a police dog anymore. This was a guardian who had found his purpose in protecting one small, vulnerable human being. The transformation was complete and absolute, and Johnson realized that their partnership had just expanded to include a third member. Dr. Martinez approached Johnson with her preliminary assessment. "She has mild to moderate hypothermia, and there are signs of malnutrition that suggest this has been an ongoing situation rather than an acute crisis. Her overall health indicates someone who has been struggling for a while. But she's going to be okay, thanks to your partner's ability to find her and provide immediate warming." Johnson nodded, his throat tight with emotion. As he looked at Rex, who had somehow managed to position himself so that one paw was gently resting against Lucy's hand, he realized that this was just the beginning of their story. Finding Lucy was just the first chapter. Now they had to find her mother, and somehow, Johnson knew that was going to be the real challenge. The note crinkled in his pocket as he reached for his radio to call in the discovery. "Lucy, 3 years old, loves dogs and singing." And somewhere in Chicago, a mother was either desperately hoping her child had been found by someone kind or had given up hope entirely. Rex looked up at Johnson as if reading his thoughts, and in those intelligent amber eyes, Johnson saw a determination that matched his own. They were going to find Lucy's mother, and somehow they were going to make this right. The soft beeping of medical monitors and the gentle hum of the hospital's heating system created a cocoon of warmth around Lucy's room, a stark contrast to the brutal cold from which she had been rescued. It was just past 3 a.m. when Lucy's small 4 hours. The massive German Shepherd had somehow managed to fold his powerful frame into the small space between Lucy's hospital bed and the wall, his intelligent amber eyes fixed on her pale face with an intensity that had amazed even the most experienced nurses on the pediatric ward. Dr. Martinez had initially been skeptical about allowing a police dog to remain in a sterile medical environment. But Rex's behavior had been so extraordinary, so protective and gentle, that she had made an unprecedented exception. When Lucy's eyes finally fluttered open, the first thing she saw was not the sterile white ceiling or the intimidating medical equipment surrounding her bed, but Rex's kind, watchful face. For a moment, she simply stared at him in confusion, her 3-year-old mind struggling to process where she was and why everything felt so different, so warm and safe. Then reality crashed over her like a wave, and Lucy's face crumpled as she began to cry. Not the wailing of a typical toddler's tantrum, but the broken, desperate sobs of a child who had been abandoned and was now completely alone in a world that felt too big and too frightening to comprehend. "Mama, Mama," she cried, her small voice hoarse from the cold and dehydration. "Want Mama? Where Mama?" The sound pierced Johnson's heart like a blade. He had been dozing fitfully in the uncomfortable hospital chair, but Lucy's cries brought him instantly alert. He started to rise, instinctively wanting to comfort the distressed child. But Rex was already moving. With a grace that seemed impossible for such a large animal, Rex lifted his head and gently placed his muzzle near Lucy's small hand. He didn't try to climb onto the bed. His training would never allow such a breach of protocol. But he positioned himself so that Lucy could see his face clearly, his eyes conveying a warmth and understanding that transcended species barriers. Lucy's sobs gradually quieted as she focused on Rex's gentle presence. She had always loved dogs. Her mother had told her stories about the friendly dogs they would have someday, when they had a home again, when things got better. This dog was the most beautiful one she had ever seen, with his thick golden brown and black coat and eyes that seemed to look right into her heart. "Doggy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Doggy warm." Those two simple words contained a world of meaning. Lucy somehow understood, with the intuitive wisdom that children sometimes possess, that this magnificent animal had saved her from the cold. She slowly extended her small hand toward Rex, and he carefully moved closer. Lucy could press her face against his neck, her small body finally relaxing as she felt the comforting warmth of his coat and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Within minutes, Lucy had fallen back asleep, one small hand buried in Rex's thick fur, her breathing deep and peaceful for the first time since her arrival at the hospital. But Rex remained awake, his eyes alert and watchful, as if he understood that his vigil was far from over. Nurse Patricia Williams, a 20-year veteran of the pediatric ward, paused in the doorway with tears in her eyes. "In all my years here," she whispered to Johnson, "I've never seen anything like this. It's like he knows exactly what she needs. As if to prove her point, Rex suddenly raised his head and looked toward the door. Moments later, Dr. Martinez appeared for her scheduled check on Lucy's condition. Rex had somehow sensed her approach before any human could have detected it, demonstrating an awareness that went far beyond ordinary canine senses. Throughout the rest of the night, Rex continued to display an almost supernatural understanding of Lucy's needs. When she whimpered in her sleep, troubled by dreams that no 3-year-old should have to endure, Rex would gently nuzzle her hand or make a soft sound that seemed to chase away whatever demons haunted her subconscious. When the nurses brought food, a simple broth and crackers that the medical team hoped would help restore Lucy's strength, Rex refused the treat Johnson offered him until Lucy had taken at least a few small bites. "He won't eat until she does," Johnson marveled to Dr. Martinez. "It's like he's appointed himself her guardian and takes that responsibility completely seriously." Dr. Martinez nodded, her professional composure softened by the extraordinary scene before her. Animals sometimes form bonds that we don't fully understand. But this is something special. Rex isn't just protecting Lucy, he's healing her. As dawn began to break outside the hospital windows, casting gentle light across the room, Johnson realized that he was witnessing the beginning of something that would change all their lives. Rex had found more than just a lost child in that pile of cardboard and snow. He had found his purpose, his reason for being. And Lucy, even in her sleep, seemed to understand that she was no longer alone in the world. The morning brought a flurry of activity that contrasted sharply with the peaceful intimacy of the night vigil. Mrs. Helen Chen from the Department of Children and Family Services arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, her professional demeanor and clipboard full of forms representing the bureaucratic reality that would now surround Lucy's case. Mrs. Chen was a veteran social worker, having seen countless cases of child abandonment, neglect, and abuse before her. Rex had not left Lucy's side, and the little girl had somehow managed to position herself so that one small arm was draped across his neck while she slept. The German shepherd's head was raised alertly as Mrs. Chen entered, his amber eyes assessing this new person with the careful attention of a professional guardian evaluating a potential threat. "This is highly unusual," Mrs. Chen said quietly to Johnson, who had finally managed to grab a cup of coffee from the hospital cafeteria. "In all my years, I have never seen a bond form this quickly or this intensely." Johnson nodded, his own amazement still fresh after watching Rex's behavior throughout the night. Rex has always been intuitive, but this is something else entirely. It's like he's decided that Lucy is his responsibility, and nothing is going to change his mind about that. Mrs. Chen began her assessment, carefully documenting Lucy's physical condition, her apparent age and development, and the circumstances of her discovery. As she worked, Johnson's partner, Detective Maria Santos, arrived with the preliminary results of their investigation into the mysterious note and Lucy's background. "We've run the handwriting through our database. No matches in criminal records, which isn't surprising given the circumstances," Santos reported. "But we did find some interesting clues in her clothing." Santos carefully laid out several evidence bags on the small table in the hospital room's corner. "Library receipt from the North Side branch dated 3 days ago. It's for children's books. Clifford the Big Red Dog and Where the Wild Things Are. There's also a bus transfer with a timestamp from 2 days ago, Route 36, that runs from North Side down to the Loop." Johnson studied the evidence, his detective instincts engaging despite his emotional investment in the case. "So she was in the North Side area recently. That narrows down our search area considerably." What happened next demonstrated Rex's remarkable intelligence in a way that left both officers speechless. The German Shepherd had been listening to the conversation with obvious attention, and when Johnson mentioned returning to the discovery site, Rex immediately stood up, careful not to disturb Lucy, and moved toward the door. He wants to come with us, Johnson realized. Rex, you need to stay with Lucy. But Rex had other ideas. He moved back to Lucy's bedside, gently nuzzled her awake, and then returned to the door, looking back at Johnson with an expression that clearly communicated his intention. Dr. Martinez, who had been observing the interaction, made a decision that surprised everyone. Take him. Lucy is stable now, and I think Rex is trying to tell you something important. We can have extra nursing staff stay with her. An hour later, Johnson and Santos found themselves following Rex through the snowy streets of Chicago as the dog discovery site. Rex moved with purpose and precision, his nose to the ground, following a scent trail that was 3 days old and had been covered by significant snowfall. The trail led them through several blocks, past a bus stop that corresponded to the transfer found in Lucy's pocket, past the North Side Library branch, and finally to a small apartment building, where Rex stopped and sat, looking up at Johnson with an expression that clearly said, "This is where it started." Apartment 2B, Santos noted, checking the building directory, registered to Sarah Mitchell and Lucy Mitchell. Lease was terminated for non-payment 5 days ago. As they investigated the building, talking to neighbors and the building manager, a picture began to emerge of a young single mother who had been struggling desperately to make ends meet. Neighbors described Sarah as quiet but loving, always with Lucy by her side, always trying her best despite obviously difficult circumstances. She lost her job about 3 months ago, Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 2A told them. After that, I could hear her crying, sometimes at night. But she always kept Lucy clean and fed. She was a good mother, just had no luck, you know. The story was gaining attention beyond the police investigation. A local news crew, tipped off by someone at the hospital, had arrived at the discovery site and was broadcasting the story of the police dog who had saved an abandoned child. The footage of Rex gently guarding Lucy in her hospital bed was being shared across social media platforms, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. #Rex and Lucy began trending on Twitter within hours. The Chicago Tribune's website crashed temporarily from the traffic as people shared the story. Local TV stations were picking up the feed, and Johnson's phone was buzzing constantly with calls from reporters wanting more information. But Johnson's focus remained on the investigation. Somewhere in Chicago, a mother named Sarah Mitchell was either desperately hoping someone had found her daughter or had given up hope entirely, and Johnson was determined to find her. By afternoon, Lucy had awakened from her longest stretch of restful sleep since arriving at the hospital. The color had returned to her cheeks, and her small body no longer shook with the residual effects of hypothermia. But more importantly, she had begun to communicate, not with the doctors or nurses who came and went, but with Rex, who had resumed his position beside her bed, as if he had never left. Johnson watched in fascination as Lucy began what could only be described as a conversation with Rex. She would whisper something to the German Shepherd, her small mouth close to his ear, and Rex would respond with subtle changes in his posture, the position of his ears, or gentle sounds that seemed to encourage her to continue talking. "What are you telling him?" Johnson, with the careful assessment that traumatized children often display around adults. But then she looked back at Rex and seemed to draw courage from his steady presence. "Doggy understands," she said quietly, her voice still hoarse but growing stronger. "Doggy knows about Mama." "Can you tell me about Mama?" Johnson asked, his voice soft and patient. Lucy buried her face in Rex's fur for a moment, gathering strength, and then began to speak in the halting way of a 3-year-old trying to explain something far too complex for her years. "Mama crying all the time," she whispered, and the words hit Johnson like a physical blow. "No more food." Mama said, "Sorry, sorry, sorry." Rex made a soft sound, almost like a sigh, and gently licked Lucy's hand, encouraging her to continue. "Last day," Lucy continued, her small voice breaking. "Mama put on pink coat warm, Mama crying, kissing Lucy. Say, 'Be good girl. Someone nice find Lucy.'" Johnson felt his throat tighten as he realized he was hearing Lucy's account of the day her mother made the desperate decision to abandon her. The love behind that decision was evident in every word. A mother ensuring her child was warmly dressed, trying to find someone who would care for her, sacrificing her own heart for what she believed was her daughter's best chance. "Mama said doggy find Lucy," Lucy continued, looking up at Rex with wonder in her eyes. "Mama right. Good doggy find Lucy." The implication of those words sent a chill through Johnson. Had Sarah Mitchell somehow known that a dog would be the one to find her daughter? Had she left Lucy in a place where she hoped a police patrol might pass by? Lucy's next words answered that question and broke Johnson's heart completely. "Mama tell Lucy's story about police doggy. Nice doggy help people. Mama say, maybe police doggy find Lucy, keep Lucy safe." Johnson realized that Sarah Mitchell had made her desperate choice with at least some hope that the police, and specifically a police dog, might find Lucy. She had tried to give her daughter the best possible chance, even in the worst possible circumstances. But then Lucy asked the question that Johnson had been dreading. "Doggy," she whispered to Rex, her small voice filled with the heartbreaking hope that only a child can possess. "Mama coming back? Lucy good girl. Lucy wait." Rex looked up at Johnson with an expression that seemed to plead for the right answer to give this innocent child. Johnson felt the full weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, not just as a police officer investigating a case, but as a human being faced with a little girl's desperate need for hope. "Lucy," Johnson said carefully, "Rex and I are going to find Mama. We're going to find her and make sure she knows how much you love." Gently on the bed beside her, a gesture of comfort and promise that seemed to say, "I'm not going anywhere." As Johnson watched this extraordinary bond between child and dog deepen, he made a personal decision that went beyond his professional duties. This wasn't just about finding a missing person or resolving a case of child abandonment. This was about reuniting a family that had been torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. He was going to find Sarah Mitchell, and he was going to bring her home to the daughter who still believed, with the pure faith of a 3-year-old, that her mama would come back for her. Rex looked up at Johnson as if reading his thoughts, and in those intelligent amber eyes, Johnson saw a determination that matched his own. They had found Lucy, they had saved her life, and now they were going to save her heart by bringing her mother home. The investigation was no longer just about solving a case. It had become a mission of healing for a broken family, guided by the wisdom of a dog who understood, better than any human, what love really meant. 3 months earlier, Sarah Mitchell had awakened to what she believed would be just another ordinary Tuesday morning. She had prepared Lucy's breakfast with the careful attention that had become second nature over their 3 years together, making sure her daughter had enough to eat, even when Sarah's own stomach remained empty. The small apartment on North Side had been cramped but warm, filled with Lucy's laughter and the dreams Sarah held of better days ahead. Dr. Pell's dental clinic had been Sarah's anchor for 2 years, providing not just a steady paycheck, but also the health insurance that had been crucial when Lucy had suffered from pneumonia the previous winter. Sarah had loved her work as a dental assistant, the routine, the patients who had come to know her by name, the sense of contributing something meaningful to her community. She had been good at her job, gentle with nervous patients, and efficient with the administrative tasks that kept the small practice running smoothly. But that Tuesday morning, Dr. Patel had called his small staff together with tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he had said, his voice breaking with the weight of what he had to tell them. "The building has been sold. The new owners want to convert it to condominiums. We have 30 days before we have to close." Sarah had felt the world shift beneath her feet. 30 days. In 30 days, she would lose not just her job, but also the health insurance that had been Lucy's safety net. She had some savings, not much, but enough to cover rent and food for perhaps 6 weeks, if she was careful. Surely she could find another position. File. We'll be in touch if anything opens up. Thank you for your interest. The first sacrifice had been the cable television. "Why no cartoons, Mama?" Lucy had asked, and Sarah had invented a game about telling stories instead of watching them. The second sacrifice had been the car. She couldn't afford the insurance and gas, so she sold it and used the money to pay another month's rent. The third sacrifice had been the heat. "Why so cold, Mama?" Lucy had asked one December morning, her breath visible in their tiny apartment. "We're playing polar bears today," Sarah had said, wrapping Lucy in every blanket they owned and holding her close. Polar bears like the cold. But Lucy had developed a cough that wouldn't go away, and Sarah had spent sleepless nights listening to her daughter's labored breathing, knowing that without health insurance, a trip to the emergency room would bankrupt them completely. The eviction notice had arrived on a Friday afternoon, delivered by a sheriff's deputy who couldn't meet Sarah's eyes as he handed her the legal documents. 30 days to vacate, 3 months of unpaid rent, no exceptions, no extensions, no mercy for a single mother trying her best in an unforgiving world. That night, after Lucy had fallen asleep, Sarah had sat at their small kitchen table with a calculator and a pile of bills, trying to perform mathematics that simply wouldn't work. No matter how she rearranged the numbers, the conclusion was always the same. She had nowhere to go, no family to turn to, no resources left to tap. Her parents had died in a car accident when Lucy was just 6 months old, and Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Lucy's father, had made it clear from the beginning that fatherhood was not in his plans. She was truly, completely alone with a responsibility that felt heavier than her shoulders could bear. The internal battle that raged in Sarah's mind over the following days was torture beyond description. Every time she looked at Lucy, bright, curious, trusting Lucy who still believed that Mama could fix anything, Sarah felt the crushing weight of her failure as a provider and protector. Lucy was getting thinner despite Sarah's efforts to ensure her daughter ate first at every meal. The cough was getting worse. Their new apartment was even smaller, even colder, and Sarah knew it was only a temporary refuge before the next eviction. The decision formed slowly, like ice crystallizing in Sarah's heart. Lucy deserved better than a mother who couldn't keep her warm, couldn't keep her fed, couldn't keep her safe. Lucy deserved parents who had steady jobs and warm homes, and the ability to take her to doctors when she was sick. The night Sarah made her final choice, she had spent hours writing, "Please give her the love I couldn't." She had dressed Lucy in the warmest clothes she owned, including the pink coat that had been a Christmas gift from Sarah's parents before their death, the last connection Lucy had to the grandparents who had loved her. Sarah had kissed her sleeping daughter's forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, memorizing the feel of Lucy's small hand in hers. "Mama loves you more than all the stars in the sky," Sarah had whispered. "Someone kind will find you, someone who can give you everything I can't." Walking away from that cardboard shelter had felt like tearing her own heart from her chest. Every step had been agony, every instinct screaming at her to turn around, to gather Lucy in her arms and never let go. But Sarah had forced herself to keep walking, convinced that her love for Lucy required this ultimate sacrifice, giving her daughter a chance at a life that Sarah could no longer provide. The 3 days following Lucy's abandonment had been a descent into a hell that Sarah had never imagined possible. Without an address, without identification showing a current residence, without any connection to the social services that might have helped her, Sarah had discovered how quickly someone could become invisible in a city of millions. The first night, she had walked the streets until dawn, her mind cycling between desperate hope that Lucy had been found by someone kind and crushing despair at what she had done. Every siren in the distance made her wonder if they were rushing to help her daughter. Every passing police car made her consider turning herself in, confessing everything, begging for the chance to see Lucy one more time. She had found temporary refuge in a 24-hour diner on the south side, nursing a single cup of coffee for 4 hours while the night manager watched her with growing suspicion. The fluorescent lights had been harsh and unforgiving, highlighting every line of exhaustion and despair on Sarah's face. When the breakfast crowd had begun to arrive, she had forced herself to leave, knowing that her presence would no longer be tolerated. The restrooms in public buildings, libraries, train stations, McDonald's restaurants had become her bathroom and washroom, where she tried desperately to maintain some semblance of hygiene and dignity. She avoided looking at herself in the mirrors, unable to face the hollow-eyed stranger staring back at her. First time on the streets, an older woman named Rose had asked on Sarah's second night, as they both sought shelter from the wind in the doorway of a closed storefront. Sarah had nodded, unable to trust her voice. "It shows," Rose had said, not unkindly. "You still look like you belong somewhere. Give it a week, and that'll fade too." Rose had shared her story. A factory worker laid off at 55, too old to find new employment, too young for Social Security, caught in the gap between systems that were supposed to help but, somehow, never did. She had been living on the streets for 8 months. "Had a daughter about your age once," Rose had added quietly. "Haven't seen her in 15 years. She's got a good life now, husband, kids. Better off without me dragging her down." Sarah had wanted to argue, to tell Rose that surely her daughter would want to help, but the words had died in her throat. Wasn't that exactly what she had told herself about Lucy? That Lucy would be better off without her? Other stories had followed in the dark corners and warm spaces where Chicago's homeless gathered. Marcus, a veteran who couldn't hold a job because of PTSD episodes. Jennifer, who had lost everything to medical bills when her son needed cancer treatment. David, a former teacher whose mental illness had cost him his career and, eventually, his family. Each story had been a mirror, reflecting Sarah's own sense of failure and worthlessness. These were good people who had been broken by circumstances beyond their control. and Sarah had begun to see herself as just another casualty in a system that chewed up the vulnerable and spit them out. The guilt had been the worst part. During the day when she should have been looking for work or shelter or some path back to stability, Sarah had found herself, instead, searching faces in every crowd, hoping for a glimpse of Lucy. She had haunted the areas around hospitals and police stations, desperate for any news of her daughter, but too ashamed to ask directly. Was Lucy warm? Was she scared? Did she cry for her mama at night? Had someone kind found her? Or was she lost in the machinery of the social services system? Just another case number in an overwhelmed bureaucracy. Sarah had stopped eating regularly, partly because she had no money, and partly because the guilt made every bite feel like betrayal. How could she take care of her own basic needs when she didn't know if Lucy was safe? Sleep had become impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lucy's trusting face, heard her daughter's voice asking, "Where, Mama?" By the third day, Sarah had begun to understand that she was disappearing, not just from society, but from herself. The woman who had once been a competent dental assistant, a loving mother, a person with dreams and plans, was fading away, replaced by someone she didn't recognize, someone who had abandoned a 3-year-old child in sub-zero temperatures, someone who deserved whatever suffering the streets could inflict. The other homeless individuals she encountered had shown her kindness, sharing food when they had it, herself in a homeless shelter on the west side, not seeking a bed, the waiting list was weeks long, but simply trying to escape the bitter wind that cut through her inadequate clothing like ice. The shelter's common area had a television, and most of the residents gathered there in the evenings, finding comfort in the shared experience of programs that reminded them of lives they used to live. Sarah had been sitting in the back, trying to become invisible, when the evening news had come on. She had been only half listening to the anchor's voice until she heard the words that made her blood freeze. Abandoned child, police dog, miraculous rescue. The footage that followed had destroyed what remained of Sarah's fragile composure. There was Lucy, her Lucy, in a hospital bed, looking small and fragile but alive, so beautifully alive. And beside her was a magnificent German shepherd who seemed to be watching over Lucy with the devotion of a guardian angel. The child, identified only as Lucy, was found nearly frozen in a makeshift shelter under an overpass, the reporter was saying. If not for the extraordinary instincts of police dog Rex, this story could have had a very different ending. Relief had flooded through Sarah with such intensity that she had nearly collapsed. Lucy was safe. Lucy was warm. Lucy was being cared for by people who could give her everything Sarah couldn't. The desperate gamble had worked. Someone kind had found her daughter. But relief had been immediately followed by a wave of shame so crushing that Sarah had felt physically ill. The news report showed interviews with hospital staff, with the police officer who had been Rex's partner, with social workers who were working to find Lucy's family. They spoke of Lucy with such tenderness, such outrage at whoever had abandoned such a sweet child, such determination to find the person responsible for this heartless act. Heartless, that was what they thought of her. That was what she was. A heartless mother who had thrown away the most precious thing in the world. Sarah had fled the shelter, unable to bear the sympathetic looks of the other residents who had watched the story with her. Out on the street, the full magnitude of her situation had finally hit her. Lucy was safe, but Sarah could never be part of her life again. How could she face her daughter after what she had done? How could she explain that she had left Lucy to freeze because she wasn't strong enough, wasn't resourceful enough, wasn't good enough to find another way? The walk to the bridge had felt like sleepwalking. Sarah's feet had carried her through the familiar neighborhoods of her former life, past the apartment building where she and Lucy had once been happy, past the clinic where she had once felt useful and competent, toward the Chicago River, where the dark water promised an end to the pain that was consuming her. Standing at the bridge's railing, looking down at the black water, to one again below, Sarah had tried to convince herself that this was the final act of love she could give her daughter. Lucy would be adopted by a family who could provide stability, security, all the things Sarah had failed to give her. Lucy would grow up believing that her mother had simply disappeared, not knowing the truth about the woman who had loved her enough to abandon her, but not enough to fight harder for their life together. "She's better off without me," Sarah whispered to the wind. "She'll have a real family now. A mother who won't fail her." The guilt and shame were like physical weights pulling her toward the dark water. She was the worst kind of mother, one who had given up, who had taken the coward's way out instead of fighting for her child. Lucy deserved so much better than a mother who crumbled at the first real test of adversity. As Sarah gripped the cold metal of the bridge railing, preparing to end her story of failure and desperation, she thought of Lucy's face on that television screen, pale but alive, surrounded by people who cared about her welfare. That image gave Sarah a strange sense of peace. At least one thing in her life had gone right. At least Lucy would have the chance Sarah had never been able to give her. The water called to Sarah like a solution to everything that was broken and unfixable in her world. Just one step, and Lucy would be free to have the life she deserved, unburdened by a mother who had proven herself unworthy of the title. Day 4 at Chicago General Hospital should have been a celebration. Lucy's vital signs had stabilized completely. Her core body temperature was normal, and the dangerous pallor that had marked her arrival was replaced by the healthy pink glow of a 3-year-old on the mend. Dr. Martinez had even mentioned that if Lucy continued to improve at this rate, she might be discharged to foster care within the week. A prospect that should have filled everyone involved with relief and satisfaction. But Rex was not relieved. If anything, the magnificent German shepherd seemed more agitated than he had been since the night they had found Lucy nearly frozen under the overpass. Johnson noticed the change first, during what had become their morning routine of checking on Lucy before the official shift began. Rex, who had spent the previous days maintaining a calm, protective vigil beside Lucy's bed, was now displaying behaviors that Johnson had never seen before in their 5-year partnership. The dog was restless in a way that went beyond simple energy or boredom. Rex would position himself at Lucy's bedside for a few minutes, then suddenly stand and pace to the window, his ears erect and swiveling, as if trying to detect some sound beyond human hearing. His breathing was slightly elevated, and his amber eyes held an intensity that spoke of urgent concern. Seemed unable to obey. The dog would lie down briefly, then spring back to his feet, moving between the window and Lucy's bed with increasing agitation. Lucy, despite her young age and recent trauma, seemed to sense Rex's distress, with the intuitive understanding that children often possess when it comes to animals. As Rex paced restlessly around her room for the 10th time that morning, Lucy extended her small hand toward him with a gesture of comfort that brought tears to the eyes of everyone present. "Doggy sad?" she asked in her sweet, hoarse voice. Lucy hugged Doggy. The pure innocence of the moment, a 3-year-old child who had been abandoned and nearly died from exposure, offering comfort to the animal who had saved her life, created a hush in the room that seemed to encompass everyone present. Even Rex paused in his pacing, moving close enough to allow Lucy's tiny hand to stroke his thick fur. "Doggy no sad," Lucy whispered, her small fingers working through Rex's coat with the gentle touch of someone who understood that giving comfort was sometimes as important as receiving it. "Lucy here. Doggy safe." But even Lucy's innocent attempts at reassurance couldn't settle whatever was driving Rex's unusual behavior. After a few moments of accepting her comfort, Rex was back at the window, whining softly. Not the sharp, alert bark he used to indicate immediate danger, but a low, mournful sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. Johnson found himself studying his partner, with the attention of someone trying to decode a complex puzzle. In 5 years of working together, Rex had never displayed this kind of sustained agitation without cause. Rex's instincts had saved Johnson's life on multiple occasions, had led them to missing persons, had detected dangers that human senses couldn't perceive. If Rex was this disturbed about something, Johnson knew he needed to pay attention. "What is it, boy?" Johnson asked, moving to stand beside Rex at the window. The view looked out over the city, showing the same urban landscape they patrolled every day. Traffic moved normally through the streets below. Pedestrians went about their business, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary to Johnson's human perception. But Rex continued to stare out at the city, with an intensity that suggested he was seeing or sensing something that escaped human detection entirely. Dr. Martinez arrived for her morning check on Lucy, and she too noticed Rex's changed behavior immediately. The pediatrician had become fascinated by the extraordinary bond between the police dog and her young patient, but now she observed Rex with the clinical eye of someone trained to recognize signs of distress. "He's not eating properly," she noted to Johnson after completing her examination of Lucy. "I asked the nurses to monitor his food intake, and his own concern deepening." Rex's appetite had always been reliable. The dog approached meals with the same professional efficiency he brought to every aspect of his work. But for the past 2 days, Rex had shown little interest in food, picking at his meals and leaving most of it untouched. "It's like he's carrying some kind of emotional burden," Dr. Martinez continued, her voice thoughtful. "I've seen this kind of behavior in therapy animals sometimes. They become so attuned to the emotional states of the humans they're helping that they begin to absorb those emotions themselves." But Johnson suspected this was something different, something more specific than general empathic response. Rex's agitation seemed to have a direction, a purpose that went beyond simply caring for Lucy. The dog's behavior suggested he was trying to communicate something urgent, something that his human partners were failing to understand. As the morning progressed, Rex's restlessness only intensified. He would settle briefly when Lucy needed comfort, providing the steady presence that had become so crucial to her recovery. But the moment Lucy was distracted by a nurse or fell into one of her frequent naps, Rex would return to his pacing, his whining, his urgent staring out the window at something only he could perceive. Johnson made a decision that surprised even himself. After 5 years of partnership, he had learned to trust Rex's instincts completely, even when he couldn't understand them. If Rex was this agitated about something, then Johnson owed it to his partner, and to Lucy, to find out what it was. "Dr. Martinez," Johnson said, "I need to take Rex out for a while. Something's got him worked up, and I think we need to find out what it is." Lucy's afternoon nap should have been a peaceful interlude in what had become the comforting routine of her recovery. The little girl had eaten a full lunch for the first time since her arrival, her appetite returning along with her strength, and had fallen asleep with one small hand resting on Rex's warm flank. The scene should have been perfectly tranquil, a healing child and her devoted guardian, both finally able to rest. Instead, Rex's agitation reached a crescendo that left no doubt that something was seriously wrong. The German shepherd had been lying quietly beside Lucy's bed, his breathing deep and regular, when suddenly he jolted upright, as if struck by lightning. His ears shot forward, his entire body went rigid with tension, and he began to emit a low whine that seemed to vibrate with urgency and distress. Johnson, who had been reviewing case files in the chair beside Lucy's bed, looked up to see Rex exhibiting behavior that was completely unprecedented in their partnership. The dog was trembling, not with fear, but with what appeared to be overwhelming emotion. His amber eyes were fixed on something beyond the hospital room, held a desperation that took Johnson's breath away. "Rex, what is it?" Johnson whispered, careful not to wake Lucy. But Rex was beyond responding to commands. The dog moved to the window with movements that were almost frantic, pressing his nose against the glass and beginning to paw at the surface, as if trying to break through to reach something on the other side. The behavior was so unusual, so alarming, that Johnson made an immediate decision. Whatever was driving Rex's distress, they needed to investigate it now, before it escalated further. "Dr. Martinez," Johnson called softly into the hallway. "I need to take Rex out. Something's wrong, and I think we need to follow his lead." Dr. Martinez appeared quickly, took one look at Rex's agitated state, and nodded without hesitation. "Go. Lucy's stable, and we have extra nursing staff on duty. Trust his instincts." Getting Rex to the patrol car was more challenging than usual. The dog was pulling toward the exit with such determination that Johnson had to work to keep up. Once they were in the vehicle, Rex's behavior became even more extraordinary. Instead of settling into his usual position, the dog remained standing, his nose pressed to the window, his body oriented toward a specific direction, as if following an invisible compass. "Okay, boy," Johnson said, starting the engine. "Show me what's got you so worked up." What followed was unlike anything Johnson had experienced in his years of police work. Rex seemed to be following something, a trail, a scent, some form of guidance that was completely imperceptible to human senses. He would whine and paw at the window when Johnson turned in the wrong direction, would settle briefly when they were heading the right way, and would become increasingly agitated as they got closer to whatever destination he was seeking. The route Rex guided them on was circuitous and seemingly random to Johnson's eyes, but he had learned to trust his partner's abilities beyond question. They drove through neighborhoods that had no apparent connection to their case, past landmarks that seemed to have no relevance to Lucy's situation, following a path that made sense only to Rex. But as they continued, Johnson began to recognize something in their route. They were retracing, in reverse, the path that Rex had led them on 3 days earlier, when they had tracked Lucy's scent from the discovery site back to her last known address. They were following Lucy's trail backward, but this time Rex seemed to be tracking something else, something that had left the apartment building after Lucy had been taken from it. "You're following her mother," Johnson realized with sudden clarity. "You're following Sarah's trail." Rex's response was immediate and unmistakable, a short, sharp bark that seemed to confirm Johnson's understanding. The dog's agitation intensified as they continued following the invisible trail, and Johnson began to understand that Rex wasn't just tracking where Sarah had been. He was somehow sensing where she was now, and that she was in immediate danger. The trail led them through increasingly familiar territory, past the library where Lucy had checked out children's books, past the bus stops that corresponded to the transfer found in Lucy's pocket, through the neighborhoods where Sarah and Lucy had once tried to build a life together. But Rex's urgency continued to build, his whines becoming more desperate, his movements more frantic. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, Rex's guidance led them toward the Chicago River. Johnson felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air as he realized where they were heading. The bridge area was a location that every Chicago police officer knew too well, a place where desperate people came to make final decisions about lives that had become unbearable. Rex's barking became sharp and urgent as they approached the bridge, and Johnson understood with crystal clarity what his partner had been trying to tell him all day. Rex had somehow sensed that Lucy's mother was in mortal danger, and they were running out of time to reach her. The connection between Rex and Lucy had manifested in ways that transcended ordinary understanding. The dog had not only saved the child, but had somehow maintained a psychic link to her mother, sensing Sarah's desperation and despair across the miles and days that separated them. The Chicago River stretched out below the bridge like a dark ribbon, its surface reflecting the last rays of sunlight that managed to pierce through the gray winter clouds. Sarah Mitchell stood at the bridge's edge, her hands gripping the cold metal railing with a strength born of desperation, her entire body shaking with more than just the bitter cold that cut through her inadequate clothing. The past 4 days had stripped away everything that had once defined her: her role as a mother, her sense of purpose, her belief in her own worth as a human being. Standing here, looking down at the dark water that promised an end to the crushing weight of guilt and shame, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace for the first time since she had walked away from Lucy's cardboard shelter. "She's better off without me," Sarah whispered to the wind. The words carried away as soon as they left her lips. "Lucy will have a real family now, parents who won't fail her the way I did." The news footage she had seen at the shelter played endlessly in her mind, Lucy looking small and fragile in that hospital bed, but alive, so beautifully alive. The magnificent police dog who had found her, who was protecting her with the devotion Sarah had been unable to provide. The doctors and social workers who spoke of finding Lucy a loving home, with people who could give her stability, security, everything Sarah had failed to provide. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to picture Lucy's future, a warm house with parents who had steady jobs and savings accounts and the ability to take her to doctors when she was sick. Lucy would grow up never knowing about the mother who had abandoned her, never carrying the burden of Sarah's failures and inadequacies. It would be as if Sarah had never existed, and Lucy would be free to become everything she was meant to be. The sound of a car engine broke through Sarah's reverie, but she didn't turn around. She had made her decision, and nothing could change the fundamental truth that Lucy was better off in a world that didn't include the woman who had thrown her away when things got difficult. But then she heard something that made her blood freeze. The deep, urgent barking of a large dog, coming closer with each second. Sarah's eyes snapped open just as she heard the sound of car doors slamming and footsteps running across the bridge's walkway. Before Sarah could fully process what was happening, a magnificent German shepherd burst into her field of vision. The dog was running directly toward her, with purpose and determination, his powerful legs carrying him across the distance between them in seconds. For a moment, Sarah thought the animal was going to tackle her, and she instinctively stepped back from the railing. But instead of attacking, the dog did something that left Sarah completely speechless. He approached her with careful, deliberate movements, took the hem of her worn coat gently in his teeth, and began to pull her away from the bridge's edge with firm but gentle insistence. Sarah stared down at the beautiful animal, at his thick golden brown and black coat, at his intelligent amber eyes that seemed to look directly into her soul, at the way he held himself with both strength and incredible gentleness. And in that instant, she knew with absolute certainty who this was. "You're Rex," she whispered, her voice breaking on the name. "You're the dog who saved my Lucy." Rex released her coat and sat down directly in front of Sarah, positioning himself between her and the bridge railing. His eyes never left her face, and in their depths, Sarah saw something that she had never expected to see again. Acceptance without judgment, compassion without conditions, understanding that transcended the need for explanations or apologies. The dog who had saved her daughter was now trying to save her, and Sarah felt something break open in her chest that had been frozen solid for days. "Ma'am?" a gentle voice called from behind her, and Sarah turned to see a police officer approaching slowly, his hands visible and non-threatening. "I'm Officer Johnson. Rex is my partner. Are you Sarah Mitchell?" Sarah nodded, unable to trust her voice, tears streaming down her face as the full weight of her situation crashed over her. She was Lucy's mother, the woman who had abandoned her child, and now expression held no anger, no condemnation, only the kind of understanding that came from someone who had seen enough human suffering to recognize desperation when he encountered it. "You're the mother who made sure Lucy was dressed warmly," Johnson said quietly, taking another careful step closer. "You're the mother who left her where someone would find her. You're the mother who wrote a note asking someone to give her love." Rex stood up and moved closer to Sarah, pressing his warm body against her legs in a gesture of support and comfort that left her sobbing openly. "Rex has been worried about you," Johnson continued, his voice gentle but filled with certainty. "For 4 days, he's been sensing that something was wrong. He led me here because he knew you were in trouble." Sarah looked down at Rex, this magnificent animal who had not only saved her daughter but had somehow maintained a connection that allowed him to find her in her darkest moment. In his eyes, she saw something she had thought was lost forever. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way back from the edge of the abyss she had been ready to jump into. "Lucy needs you," Johnson said simply. "Rex knows it, and now you need to know it too." The wind whipped across the bridge with brutal intensity, but Sarah Mitchell barely felt the cold that cut through her thin clothing. All her awareness was focused on the magnificent German shepherd sitting before her, his amber eyes holding depths of understanding that seemed to transcend the boundaries between human and animal consciousness. This was Rex, the guardian angel who had saved her daughter's life when Sarah had failed so catastrophically as a mother. "I'm not worthy," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking as fresh tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm not worthy to even touch the dog that saved my baby." She took a step backward, away from Rex's steady gaze, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of her own unworthiness. How could she stand in the presence of this noble creature who had done what she couldn't, who had protected Lucy, kept her warm, refused to leave her side even when professional duty might have demanded it? Sarah felt like she was looking at everything she should have been as a mother, embodied in the form of a police dog who had shown more devotion to Lucy in 4 days than Sarah felt she had managed in 3 years. But Rex had other ideas about maintaining distance. The German shepherd rose gracefully to his feet and approached Sarah with deliberate, careful movements, as if he understood that she was as fragile and wounded as Lucy had been when he first found her. Without hesitation, Rex gently pressed his muzzle against Sarah's hand, then moved to nuzzle her arm with the same tender care he had shown Lucy in the hospital. The touch was electric in its compassion. Sarah felt Rex's warmth, the softness of his fur, began to crack. This magnificent animal, who owed her nothing, who had every reason to see her as the enemy of the child he protected, was offering her comfort with the same generous heart that had saved Lucy's life. "He knows," Officer Johnson said quietly, approaching with the careful movements of someone trained to defuse dangerous situations. "Rex knows you're Lucy's mother, and he knows you're in pain." Sarah looked up at Johnson through her tears, expecting to see judgment, condemnation, the righteous anger of someone who had witnessed the aftermath of child abandonment. Instead, she saw something that surprised her. Understanding, even compassion, in the eyes of a man who had every right to arrest her on the spot. "I have a daughter," Johnson continued, his voice soft but carrying the weight of personal truth. "Emma's 3, just like Lucy. And I'll tell you something I've never admitted to anyone before. There have been nights when I've felt like I was failing her so completely that she'd be better off without me." The admission hung in the cold air between them, and Sarah stared at Johnson in shock. This competent, professional police officer, someone who clearly had his life together, who was part of the system that protected children, was confessing to the same doubts that had driven Sarah to the bridge. When Emma had pneumonia last year, Johnson continued, I couldn't afford to take time off work to stay with her. I had to drop her at daycare even when she was running a fever because we needed my paycheck. I sat in my patrol car afterward and cried because I felt like the worst father in the world. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. The isolation that had consumed her for months, the certainty that she was uniquely terrible as a parent, began to crack under the weight of Johnson's honest confession. But the difference between us, Sarah said, her voice raw with pain, is that you didn't abandon Emma in a pile of cardboard when things got hard. You didn't walk away from your sick child and leave her to freeze. The words poured out of Sarah like poison that had been festering inside her for days. I'm the mother who gave up. I'm the woman who looked at her beautiful, innocent daughter and decided that my love wasn't enough to keep her safe. I'm the monster who walked away while Lucy was sleeping, who left her alone in the dark, who... Sarah's voice broke completely, and she collapsed to her knees on the cold concrete of the bridge walkway, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of her soul. The guilt, the shame, the crushing weight of what she had done, it all poured out in a torrent of anguish that had been building since the moment she had walked away from Lucy's makeshift shelter. Rex immediately moved to Sarah's side, positioning himself so that she could lean against his warm, solid presence. He didn't try to stop her crying or hurry her through her pain. He simply offered himself as an anchor in the storm of her grief, the way he had done for Lucy in the hospital. I loved her so much, Sarah sobbed into Rex's thick fur. I loved her more than my own life, and I still wasn't strong enough to find another way. I still chose to give up rather than keep fighting for her. Johnson knelt down beside Sarah and Rex, creating a circle of presence around her pain. Love isn't about being perfect, he said gently. Love is about doing the best you can with what you have, even when it feels like it's not enough. Rex pressed closer to Sarah, as if he understood that his role in this moment was not just to offer comfort, but to serve as a bridge between the despair that had brought her to this bridge and the hope that might lead her back to the daughter who still needed her. In Rex's steady presence, Sarah felt for the first time in days that she was not completely alone with her failures and her pain. The story that emerged from Sarah's broken confession painted a picture of desperation so complete that Johnson found himself struggling to maintain his professional composure. Sitting on the cold bridge walkway with Rex positioned protectively between them, Sarah finally gave voice to the months of struggle that had led to the most desperate decision of her life. It started with Lucy's pneumonia, Sarah said, her voice hollow with exhaustion and pain. 8 months ago, when she was so sick I thought I was going to lose her. The hospital bills, even with insurance, they were more than I made in 3 months. I used up every penny of our savings, maxed out my credit cards, borrowed money from everyone I could think of. Johnson listened without interruption, understanding that Sarah needed to purge herself of the story she had been carrying alone for so long. Rex remained pressed against her side, his warm presence providing the strength she needed to continue. When Dr. Patel's clinic closed, I thought it was temporary. I thought I'd find another job, maybe even a better one. I applied everywhere, dental offices, medical clinics, even retail jobs that paid half what I was making. But every interview ended the same way: we'll keep your resume on file. The wind continued to whip across the bridge, but Sarah seemed oblivious to the cold now, focused entirely on the confession that was pouring out of her like blood from a wound. The first month without income, I told myself we'd be fine. I had a little savings left, and unemployment would kick in soon. The second month, I started making choices: heat or groceries, electricity or Lucy's vitamins. The third month, Sarah's voice broke again. The third month, I realized we were going to lose our apartment, and I had nowhere to go. Johnson felt his throat tighten as he imagined the progressive desperation that must have consumed Sarah with each passing day. He thought of his own daughter Emma, of the security his steady paycheck provided, of how quickly that security could disappear if circumstances changed. "I was too proud to ask for help," Sarah continued, and the words came out like a confession of the worst kind of sin. "I kept thinking I could fix it myself, that I just needed a little more time, one more job interview, one more chance. By the time I swallowed my pride and tried to apply for assistance, it was too late. The waiting lists were months long, and we had weeks." Rex shifted position slightly, pressing more firmly against Sarah's side, as if sensing that the hardest part of her story was yet to come. "The moment I knew I had failed her completely was when I woke up one morning and found Lucy shivering under every blanket we owned, and she still couldn't get warm. She had developed this cough that wouldn't go away, and I knew it was because our apartment was too cold, because she wasn't getting enough to eat, because I couldn't provide the basic necessities that any decent parent should be able to give their child." Sarah looked directly at Johnson for the first time since she had begun talking, and he saw in her eyes the absolute conviction of someone who believed she had committed an unforgivable sin. "I realized that my love for Lucy wasn't enough if it couldn't keep her warm, couldn't keep her fed, couldn't keep her healthy. I was watching my daughter suffer because of my failures, and I knew that somewhere in Chicago there were families who could give her everything I couldn't. The logic was heartbreaking in its twisted compassion, a mother's love so profound that it convinced her that abandonment was an act of mercy. I spent 3 days writing that note," Sarah whispered. "I must have written it 100 times, trying to find the words to explain to whoever found her that I wasn't abandoning Lucy because I didn't love her, but because I loved her too much to watch her suffer for my mistakes." Johnson felt tears threatening his own composure as he began to understand the tortured reasoning that had led Sarah to her desperate choice. This wasn't the callous abandonment he had initially imagined. This was a mother's love pushed beyond the breaking point, twisted into a decision that felt like mercy, but had nearly destroyed them both. "Sarah," Johnson said gently, his voice carrying all the compassion he felt for this broken woman and the impossible situation that had driven her to such extremes. "Lucy doesn't need a perfect mother who can provide everything. She needs her mother, the woman who dressed her warmly, who left her where someone would find her, who wrote that note asking a stranger to love her daughter." Sarah shook her head desperately, but Johnson continued, his words gentle but firm. "Rex found Lucy because you made the right choice about where to leave her. She survived because you made sure she was dressed for the cold. She's going to be okay, because even in your darkest moment, you were still thinking about what was best for her." Look down at Rex, who gazed back at her with those remarkable amber eyes that seemed to hold depths of understanding beyond ordinary canine intelligence. "But how can I face her?" Sarah whispered. "How can I look at my daughter and explain that I walked away from her when she needed me most?" What happened next would remain etched in Johnson's memory as one of the most extraordinary moments of his career in law enforcement. Rex, who had been providing steady comfort to Sarah throughout her confession, suddenly stood and moved to face her directly. With movements that were deliberate and unmistakably purposeful, the German shepherd gently took Sarah's hand in his mouth, not biting, not pulling, but holding her hand with the same careful tenderness he had shown Lucy in the hospital. Then with gentle but insistent pressure, Rex began to guide Sarah toward the patrol car. "No," Sarah said, trying to pull away from Rex's gentle grip. I can't face her. I'm the mother who threw her away. I'm the one who gave up when things got hard." But Rex refused to release her hand. Instead, he applied just enough pressure to keep her moving, his amber eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that seemed to communicate something beyond ordinary understanding. This magnificent animal who had saved Lucy's life who had somehow sensed Sarah's despair across the miles and days that separated them, was now insisting that she come with them. "Rex believes in second chances," Johnson said quietly, walking alongside them as Rex continued to guide Sarah toward the car. "He should know something about that. He was rescued from an abusive situation when he was just a puppy." Sarah looked down at Rex with new understanding, seeing not just the confident police dog who had become Lucy's guardian, but an animal who had once been broken and had learned to trust again. The family that had Rex before the police department got him used to keep him chained in their backyard. Johnson continued, "No shelter, barely any food, no human contact except when they wanted to take out their frustrations on something that couldn't fight back. When animal control finally removed him, he was so traumatized that most people thought he could never be rehabilitated." Rex continued his gentle guidance, and Sarah found herself unable to resist the patient insistence of this remarkable animal who seemed to understand her pain better than any human could. But Dr. Williams, the veterinarian who worked with traumatized animals, saw something in Rex that nobody else could see. She said that beneath all the fear and hurt, there was a heart that wanted to trust again, wanted to love again, wanted to believe that not all humans were cruel. They had reached the patrol car, but Rex didn't try to get Sarah inside. Instead, he sat down beside her, still holding her hand gently in his mouth, his presence a constant reminder that sometimes the most damaged souls were capable of the greatest healing. It took 2 years of patient work before Rex was ready to join the canine program. Johnson continued, 2 years of learning that he was safe, that he was valued, that his past didn't define his future. And look at him now. He's saved more lives than I can count, including Lucy's. Sarah looked into Rex's eyes and saw reflected there something she had thought was lost forever. The possibility of redemption, of second chances, of love that could overcome even the deepest failures. "Rex sees something in you that you can't see in yourself," Johnson said. "The same thing Dr. Williams saw in him when everyone else thought he was beyond saving. He sees a mother who made an impossible choice out of love, not a woman who deserves to be condemned." Rex finally released Sarah's hand, but he remained sitting beside her, his warm presence a constant reminder that he had chosen to trust her, to believe in her worthiness of redemption, despite everything she believed about herself. "Lucy is asking for you," Johnson said gently. "Not for a perfect mother, not for someone who never makes mistakes, but for her mama, the woman who sang her to sleep, who told her stories about police dogs, who loved her enough to make the hardest decision any mother could face." Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a crack in the wall of self-hatred and despair that had been building since the night she walked away from Lucy. If this noble dog, who had every reason to see her as an enemy, could believe she deserved a second chance, perhaps there was hope for healing after all. "She needs you," Johnson continued. "Not the perfect mother you think you should be, but the mother you are, flawed, struggling, but filled with a love so deep that you were willing to sacrifice your own heart for what you thought was her good." Rex stood and moved closer to Sarah, pressing his warm body against her legs, in a gesture that felt like both forgiveness and encouragement. In his steady presence, Sarah felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way back from the edge of the abyss she had been ready to leap into. Looking down at Rex, who gazed back at her, with those remarkable eyes full of understanding and acceptance, Sarah realized that even this noble dog believed she deserved a second chance. And if Rex, who had saved Lucy's life, who had somehow maintained a psychic connection to her despair, who had led Johnson to this bridge at the exact moment she needed saving, if Rex believed she was worthy of redemption, then perhaps it was time to believe it herself. "Okay," Sarah whispered, the word barely audible over the wind. "Okay, take me to my daughter." The drive to Chicago General felt endless, Every mile brought Sarah closer to the daughter she'd abandoned, and to the reckoning she both longed for and dreaded. Her hands shook so badly she clasped them in her lap, but seemed to come from deeper inside. "What if she doesn't recognize me? What if she's better off without me?" she whispered. Beside her, Rex shifted closer, pressing his warm body against her, amber eyes steady with reassurance. Officer Johnson, at the wheel, said, "Rex has never been wrong about people's hearts. If he brought you here, trust he knows something we don't." By the time they reached the hospital, Sarah felt she was walking toward Judgment Day. The corridors smelled of antiseptic. Machines beeped softly. Every step toward the pediatric ward tightened her chest. This was where Lucy had been cared for when Sarah couldn't. "She's just through here," Johnson said gently. Through the window, Sarah saw Lucy, bright-eyed, pink-cheeked, talking animatedly to a stuffed dog. The sight brought tears. 4 days ago, she'd been pale and malnourished. Now she was safe, thriving. "She's been asking about her mama every day," Johnson murmured. "Tells Rex stories about you." Rex nudged Sarah toward the door. Trembling, she opened it. Lucy looked up, puzzled at first. Then her face lit like sunrise. "Mama!" she cried, scrambling from bed, arms outstretched. "Rex, bring Mama back!" Sarah nearly collapsed under the force of that joy. She'd braced for rejection. Instead, she was met with pure forgiveness. She gathered Lucy close, sobbing apologies, but Lucy only patted her cheeks. "Lucy happy. Doggy brought Mama back, just like Lucy tell him." Sarah realized Lucy had never doubted her return. "Good doggy," Lucy said, beaming at Rex. The shepherd positioned himself to touch them both, his steady presence sealing the reunion. Dr. Martinez and Nurse Williams paused in the doorway, moved to tears. "That little girl just taught us all something about unconditional forgiveness," Martinez whispered. Lucy sang a little song about doggies and mamas, while Rex lay beside the bed, vigil intact. Mrs. Chen from Child Services entered quietly, clipboard forgotten. "In 15 years, I've never seen a child reunite with such joy," she murmured. Proudly, Lucy introduced Sarah to every nurse and doctor. "This my mama. Rex find mama. Now we family again, and Rex is Lucy's family too." Rex's calm gaze shifted between them, content. "He'll always be part of Lucy's family," Johnson said. Sarah, overwhelmed, told Johnson, "You saved my life tonight." "Rex did," he replied, "but you'll need support. Lucy's coming home soon." Sarah's face fell. She had no job, no home. Mrs. Chen stepped forward. "What you did came from love. Together. I'll never leave her again." Johnson watched them, knowing Rex's real mission was complete, bringing this broken family back together. "Rex knows about second chances," Johnson said softly. "Sometimes the most damaged hearts love the strongest." As evening settled over the hospital, Sarah held Lucy close, while Rex kept watch. Everyone in that room understood they had witnessed something rare, a redemption born of love, the miracle of a family reunited by a dog who never gave up. The first news broadcast about Rex, Lucy, and Sarah's reunion turned a local Chicago story into a global wave of compassion. What began as a report on a police dog saving an abandoned child became a tale of love, sacrifice, and redemption that struck a chord everywhere. Channel 7's Maria Santos was first on the scene at Chicago General, tipped off by a hospital worker. Her footage, Sarah clutching Lucy while Rex stood watch, aired that evening, leaving viewers in tears. "This is a story that defies simple categories," Maria said on air. "It's about a dog whose instincts saved a family, a mother who made an impossible choice for her child's sake, and the power of love to heal the deepest wounds." In an interview, Officer Johnson spoke about Rex's role. "He's more than a police dog. He's a guardian, a healer. What he did for this family came from his heart." One clip, Lucy braiding ribbons into Rex's fur while he lay perfectly still, captured the internet's imagination. Within hours, #RexandLucy was trending. CNN, Fox, and major networks picked up the story. Social media overflowed with messages from parents, grandparents, and dog lovers who saw their own struggles reflected in Sarah's ordeal. Donations poured in, a GoFundMe raising $50,000 in a single day. Sarah is every parent who's felt like they weren't enough, psychologist Dr. Patricia Williams explained on a follow-up segment. Rex represents the unconditional love and second chances we all hope for. Rex became a symbol far beyond policing. Memes, children's book proposals, even a toy deal offer followed. Chicago Police Superintendent Robert Jackson called him a symbol of compassion, intuition, and service beyond duty. The story also sparked debate. Advocates highlighted the systemic failures, lack of affordable housing, broken safety nets, that had driven Sarah to her breaking point. "What makes this different," said Margaret Chen of the Chicago Coalition Against Family Homelessness, "is they got a second chance. We need more of those before parents reach desperation." Offers of help flooded in. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a dentist and small business owner, offered Sarah a full-time dental assistant position with benefits. Other business owners extended job offers too, from restaurant work to hospital billing. Housing came from Carmen and Roberto Rodriguez. Months. "Lucy and Sarah aren't strangers. They're neighbors who need support," Carmen told reporters. Lincoln Elementary students prepared welcome cards for Lucy. Artwork depicted Rex in a superhero cape, comic strips of his rescue, and notes calling all three heroes. Teacher Patricia Lee bound the cards into a scrapbook for Lucy's first day. The veterinary community also rallied. Dr. Michael Torres, a former military vet, offered Rex free, lifetime care. The Chicago Police Department received hundreds of letters praising Johnson and Rex's compassion. Other police agencies asked to learn about their canine program, especially Rex's empathetic training. Mrs. Chen, Dr. Martinez, and Johnson coordinated the flood of offers into a cohesive support plan. Sarah was introduced to the Chicago Single Mothers Network by Lisa Thompson, a fellow single mom. The group became a lifeline, offering babysitting swaps, job networking, and emotional support. Daycare director Janet Williams at Sunshine Daycare designed a plan to integrate Rex into Lucy's weekly routine, knowing the dog's presence was key to her healing. Twice a week, Rex visited, calming not just Lucy but other children who had faced trauma. Johnson helped Sarah navigate social services, legal aid, and job applications, down to replacing lost IDs and arranging transportation to interviews. "He's been like a guardian angel," Sarah told a reporter. Rex balanced his police work with being Lucy's therapeutic companion, seamlessly shifting from focused canine officer to gentle friend. Dr. Martinez noted Lucy's rapid recovery. Her attachments to her mother and Rex are healthy and strong. The foundation here is ideal for healing. 6 weeks after the reunion, the story was less a viral sensation and more a living example of what happens when a community chooses compassion over judgment. "This isn't just one family's miracle," Dr. Williams said. "It's proof of what's possible when people offer second chances instead of condemnation." 6 weeks after the reunion that had captivated millions, Sarah stood in the doorway of the Rodriguez family's 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't large or fancy, but to her and Lucy, it was everything: stability, safety, and the chance to start over. The GoFundMe had climbed past $125,000. Donations came from strangers around the globe who saw themselves in Sarah's story of loss and redemption. People didn't just give money, they gave hope. "Mama, look! Lucy's room!" Lucy squealed, racing to the smaller bedroom. For a child who'd known only temporary shelters, having her own space was pure magic. Volunteers had painted the walls soft permanence, and the 2 beings she loved most would be here with her. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, who'd offered Sarah a dental assistant job, had become mentor as well as employer. "I've been where you are," she told Sarah. "You made the hardest choice because you thought it was best for your child. That says everything about your character." The job, with its steady income and flexible hours, was more than work. It was a lifeline. Daily routines turned the apartment into a home. Johnson adjusted Rex's patrol schedule so he could walk Lucy to Sunshine Daycare each morning. Neighbors waved as the little girl strode beside the towering German Shepherd. "Lucy and Rex are like celebrities," laughed Carmen Rodriguez. Afternoons were for chatter-filled walks home, simple dinners, and laughter. Evenings brought story time, Sarah's community college coursework, and Lucy's giggles filling every corner. "This is what I dreamed of when I was on the streets," Sarah told Johnson one night. Rex's role deepened far beyond planned therapeutic visits. He sensed Lucy's nightmares before they fully took hold, nudging her awake and staying by her side until fear passed. "He's essentially become her early warning system," Dr. Martinez noted. By day, Rex was her confidant. Lucy whispered secrets into his fur, trusting him with every joy and worry. Under Sarah's supervision, she took pride in caring for him, feeding, brushing, and tending to his needs with serious concentration. "He's teaching her responsibility and empathy," Sarah told Johnson. Rex balanced 2 lives: disciplined canine officer on duty, gentle guardian off duty. Lucy seemed to read his moods intuitively, adjusting her play or comfort as needed. "I watch them together and I see what love should be," Sarah wrote in her therapy journal. "No judgment, no conditions, just pure commitment." Her gratitude for Rex grew from thankfulness for past heroics to awe at his ongoing presence in their lives. He doesn't want repayment, she realized. He wants relationship. 3 months in, healing was visible in everything, from Lucy's confident laughter to Sarah's ease in accepting help. At Lincoln Elementary, Lucy surpassed every expectation. Mrs. Walsh, her teacher, had braced for behavioral struggles, but instead saw a child with extraordinary empathy. Lucy welcomed new classmates, offering the kind of acceptance she'd once longed for herself. Weekly therapy with Dr. Sandra Williams helped Sarah confront guilt and see her choice in a new light. "I'm learning to forgive myself," she admitted. "The love was always there. I just couldn't see it." Rex anchored them both. Sarah called him their emotional barometer. His calm meant they were in the bedroom where Lucy fell asleep, knowing he'd be there. "They're not the same people who moved in," Carmen Rodriguez told her husband. "They're rooted now. They belong." Johnson, watching their transformation, summed it up simply. Rex didn't just save Lucy's life. He saved a family and made them stronger than ever. Sarah's final journal entry of the season read, "We're thriving. Every day, I'm grateful for the miracle that brought us back together, and for the community that helped us learn to be a family again. The first real test of Sarah and Lucy's rebuilt life came on a Tuesday in late October. Sarah woke to Lucy's feverish skin and the harsh barking cough every parent dreads. "Mama, Lucy hot," the little girl croaked, her flushed face and glassy eyes a haunting echo of the pneumonia that had nearly broken them 8 months earlier. Panic surged through Sarah's chest. Memories of hospital bills, fear, and helplessness threatened to overwhelm her. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, forcing calm into her voice. "Mama's going to take care of you." Rex arrived for his morning visit, instantly grasping the change. He approached Lucy with deliberate care, sniffed gently, then lay beside her bed, refusing to move. "Rex, stay with Lucy?" she asked weakly. The shepherd settled in, every muscle declaring he would guard her until she was well. When Sarah called Dr. Martinez, Rex stayed vigilant, alerting her with soft whines when Lucy's fever spiked, glancing toward her water cup when fluids were needed. "He's monitoring her better than equipment could," Dr. Martinez said during a rare house call. The community rallied. Carmen Rodriguez brought soup. Dr. Hendricks gave Sarah paid leave without hesitation. Johnson stopped in twice daily, reassuring Sarah, "Look how different this is from before. You've got love, resources, and wisdom now." This time, Sarah stayed steady, singing silly songs to coax Lucy into drinking water, reading aloud for hours, and keeping a constant, comforting presence. By day 4, Lucy's fever broke. Her resilience returned as fast as her laugh, but the lesson stayed. They could face illness without falling apart. Weeks later, Lucy's kindergarten My Hero project left her teacher speechless. While classmates chose firefighters or astronauts, Lucy's choice was certain. "Rex, save Lucy's life. Rex, bring Mama back. Rex is the best hero in the whole world." Her poster told their story. Photos of Rex in uniform, drawings of the bridge, and one of their family in the apartment. "Rex is very big and strong." Lucy introduced him solemnly. "Friends, this is Rex. He's the best dog in the whole world." Johnson demonstrated Rex's skills, but Lucy's request to show how he helps when people are sad melted everyone. Rex moved to her side, nuzzled her hand, and let her lean into him. Children lined up to pet him. "I want to be kind like Rex," one said. Another added, "My dog helps me when I'm scared of thunderstorms." Sarah, watching, struggled to keep her emotions in check. This was the same child who'd once been found freezing in a cardboard shelter, now confidently teaching her peers about hope. In November, Sarah walked into Chicago Care Shelter and told the intake coordinator, "I'd like to volunteer." Patricia Green, the seasoned coordinator, sensed Sarah's depth of experience. "I was homeless 8 months ago," Sarah said steadily. "I made desperate choices that almost cost me everything. I got help, second chances. Now I want to give that hope to others." She spoke of knowing what it feels like to believe you failed so completely your kids would be better off without you, and wanting to help parents see there were other options. Patricia offered her a role in the family program, supporting parents transitioning from emergency housing to permanent stability. It was, in many ways, the full circle of Sarah's journey. Once a mother on the brink, now someone strong enough to guide others back from the edge. Her life's anchor, still the steadfast German shepherd who had refused to give up on her family. Sarah's first day of volunteer work had been emotionally challenging in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. Walking through the shelter, she saw versions of herself from 8 months earlier, women with tired eyes and children who clung too tightly, families whose possessions fit into garbage bags, people who moved with the careful wariness of those who had learned not to trust easily. "This could have been us," Sarah wrote in her journal that evening. "If things had gone differently, if Rex hadn't found Lucy, if the community hadn't rallied around us, Lucy and I could still be here, still struggling, still hoping for someone to care enough to help." But instead of being paralyzed by the reminder of how close she had come to losing everything, Sarah found herself energized by the opportunity to provide hope to families who were living through their own darkest moments. Her first client had been Maria Santos, a single mother of 2 whose apartment fire had left the family temporarily homeless while insurance claims were processed. Maria's situation was different from Sarah's, but the emotions were achingly familiar. The fear, the exhaustion, the crushing weight of responsibility for children's well-being in circumstances that felt impossible to manage. "I know this feels overwhelming," Sarah told Maria during their first meeting. "People who want to help, resources available, and paths forward that you might not be able to see right now." What Sarah could offer that professional social workers couldn't was the credibility that came from lived experience. When she told clients that things could get better, they believed her because she had walked the same path they were walking. Rex had become an unofficial therapy dog for the shelter, accompanying Sarah on some of her volunteer visits and providing the same calming presence for other traumatized children that he had given Lucy. The sight of the magnificent German shepherd patiently allowing frightened children to pet his fur had become one of the shelter's most healing resources. "Rex remembers what it's like to be scared and abandoned," Sarah explained to a group of children whose parents were working with the shelter's housing assistance program. "Rex was rescued too, and he learned that there are good people in the world who want to help. That's what he's trying to teach you." The transformation in Sarah's sense of purpose had been remarkable to witness. Johnson, who visited occasionally to check on their volunteer work, noted the confidence and strength that had replaced the broken desperation he had encountered on the bridge 8 months earlier. "You've found your calling," he observed during one of their conversations. "This isn't just volunteer work for you. This is your mission, your way of turning your pain into purpose." Sarah had begun pursuing additional training in family crisis intervention, taking evening classes that would allow her to expand her volunteer role into professional social work. Her lived experience, combined with formal training, would make her uniquely qualified to help families navigate the complex systems and emotional challenges that came with homelessness and crisis. "I used to think that the worst night of my life, standing on that bridge ready to give up, was a testament to my failure as a person," Sarah reflected during a conversation with her therapist. "Now I understand that it was the beginning of my transformation into someone who could help other people find their way back from despair. My lowest moment led to my greatest purpose." The ripple effects of their family's healing had expanded far beyond their own recovery. Through Sarah's volunteer work, Rex's therapeutic visits, and Lucy's innocent but powerful example of resilience and forgiveness, they had become a source of hope and healing for countless other families facing their own impossible choices. "We're not just surviving our story anymore," Sarah wrote in her journal as she reflected on their journey. "We're using our story to help write better endings for other people's lives. Rex taught us about unconditional love and second chances. Now it's our turn to pass that gift forward to families who need to know that redemption is possible, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the people who have been broken are the ones best qualified to help others put the pieces back together. The winter wind that howled outside their apartment on this anniversary evening carried the same bitter cold that had nearly claimed Lucy's life exactly 1 year ago. But inside their warm home, the Mitchell family was celebrating not the darkness of that terrible night, but the miracle of light that had emerged from it. Candles flickered on their small dining table, casting dancing shadows on the walls that were now covered with Lucy's artwork, family photographs, and the accumulated treasures of a year spent building a life together. "Tell the story again, Mama," Lucy requested, settling into her favorite spot on the couch with a picture book in her lap and Rex positioned beside her with the patient attention of someone who had heard this tale many times but never tired of its telling. Lucy had grown remarkably over the past year. At 4 years old, she was tall for her age, her face having filled out with the healthy roundness that spoke of regular meals and security. Her hair, which had been thin and brittle during their darkest days, now fell in shiny waves around her shoulders. But the most striking change was in her eyes, where once there had been the haunted wariness of a child who had known too much uncertainty. Now there was the bright confidence of a little girl who knew she was loved and safe. "Once upon a time," Lucy began, reading from the book they had created together about their family's journey, "there was a brave police dog named Rex who had the most important job in the whole world, finding people who needed help and bringing families back together." Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway, her heart full as she observed this nightly ritual that had become sacred to their small family. The woman who stood there now bore little resemblance to the desperate, broken person who had stood on a bridge a year ago, ready to end her life, in the belief that Lucy would be better off without her. Sarah's transformation had been as remarkable as Lucy's, though perhaps more subtle to casual observers. She had gained weight and strength, her face no longer bearing the gaunt exhaustion of chronic stress and malnutrition. Her hair had grown longer and healthier, and she carried herself with the confident posture of someone who knew her worth and place in the world. More importantly, Sarah had achieved the kind of stability that had seemed impossible during their darkest days. Her position at Dr. Hendrick's dental office had become permanent, complete with benefits and a salary that allowed them not just to survive, but to build toward the future. For the first time in years, Sarah had a savings account with money growing in it each month. She had completed her certification in dental hygiene, which had come with a significant raise and increased job security. Rex she had mostly memorized, but he was still the bravest, kindest dog who ever lived. And he loved his family more than anything in the whole world. Rex, now 6 years old, was indeed showing subtle signs of aging that were visible mainly to those who knew him best. His muzzle had acquired a distinguished touch of gray, and he moved with slightly less of the explosive energy that had characterized his younger years. But his devotion to Lucy and Sarah had only deepened with time, and his intelligent amber eyes still held the same warmth and understanding that had made him such an extraordinary guardian. "Rex knows this story is about him," Lucy announced solemnly to Sarah, pausing in her reading to stroke Rex's thick fur. "Rex likes it when Lucy reads about what a good dog he is." A gentle knock at the door announced Johnson's arrival for their anniversary dinner, a tradition that had emerged naturally from their shared understanding that this date would forever mark the night that changed all their lives. Johnson had become more than just the police officer who had helped save their family. He had become a cherished friend whose own life had been enriched by witnessing their journey from despair to joy. "How's our celebrity doing tonight?" Johnson asked, greeting Rex with the affection of a longtime partner, while noting the subtle changes that marked the passage of time. Rex's tail wagged with enthusiasm at Johnson's arrival, but the greeting was gentler than it had been in years past, speaking to the wisdom and contentment that came with age and the security of knowing he was exactly where he belonged. "Officer Johnson," Lucy squealed, running to hug the man who had become Uncle Mike in all but official designation. "Lucy is reading Rex the story about how he saved Lucy's family. Want to hear?" "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Johnson replied, settling into the chair that had become designated as his during these visits. He looked around the apartment with the satisfaction of someone who had played a role in creating something beautiful and lasting. The space had evolved significantly over the year, transforming from the sparse, grateful shelter they had first moved into to a true home filled with the accumulation of life lived together. Lucy's toys were scattered in corners. Sarah's nursing textbooks were stacked on the kitchen counter beside cookbooks, filled with family recipes they were learning to make together. And Rex's collection of toys and comfort items had claimed a permanent corner near the window, where he could watch the street while maintaining his protective vigil. "You know what amazes me most?" Johnson said to Sarah, as they watched Lucy continue her reading performance for Rex, who listened with the focused attention of someone who understood every word. "It's not just that you survived what happened, or even that you rebuilt your lives. It's that you've become your worst experience into the foundation for your best life." Sarah nodded, understanding exactly what Johnson meant. "We're not the same people we were a year ago," she agreed. "We're not even the same people we were 6 months ago. Every day we're becoming more of who we're meant to be, together." As the evening progressed and the anniversary celebration continued with Sarah's homemade dinner and Lucy's enthusiastic retelling of their family's story, a moment occurred that would remain etched in everyone's memory as evidence of the profound maturity that Lucy had developed through her experiences. Rex had settled into his favorite spot beside the couch, his breathing deep and regular, with the contentment of a dog who knew he was exactly where he belonged. But Lucy, with the observational skills that children often possessed when it came to the animals they loved, noticed something that the adults had missed. "Rex tired tonight," Lucy announced, pausing in her animated chatter to study her beloved companion with the focused attention of someone conducting an important assessment. "Rex working hard today?" Johnson nodded, recognizing Lucy's intuitive understanding of Rex's condition. "Rex had a long patrol shift today, sweetheart. He's been working for many years, and sometimes that makes him more tired than he used to be." Lucy's expression grew serious, in the way that indicated she was processing information that felt important and required careful consideration. At 4 years old, Lucy possessed an emotional intelligence that often surprised adults, a wisdom that seemed to have been forged in the crucible of their shared trauma and recovery. "Rex getting old like Grandpa Rodriguez?" Lucy asked, referring to the elderly gentleman in their building who had become a beloved figure in her life. Sarah felt her throat tighten as she realized they were approaching a conversation she had been dreading, but knew was inevitable. Rex was aging, and while he remained healthy and devoted to his duties, the passage of time was beginning to show in subtle ways that Lucy's perceptive eyes had detected. "Rex is getting a little older," Sarah said gently, moving to sit beside Lucy on the couch so they could have this important discussion together. "But that doesn't mean he's going anywhere. It just means we need to take extra good care of him, the way he's always taken care of us." Lucy nodded solemnly, her small face reflecting the gravity of this responsibility. "Lucy, take care of Rex," she declared with the absolute certainty of a child making a sacred promise. "Rex took care of Lucy when Lucy was scared and cold. Now Lucy, take care of Rex forever and ever." What followed was a demonstration of empathy and loyalty that moved everyone present to tears. Lucy carefully got up from the couch and went to the kitchen, returning with Rex's water bowl freshly filled and his favorite treats arranged on a small plate. "Rex hungry? Rex thirsty?" she asked, kneeling beside the German shepherd and offering him the treats with the gentle care of someone who understood that providing comfort was sometimes as important as receiving it. Rex accepted the treats with gracious dignity, his tail wagging gently as he recognized the role reversal that was taking place. The dog who had spent a year caring for Lucy's every need was now allowing himself to be cared for in return, and the trust inherent in that exchange spoke to the depth of their bond. "Good boy, Rex," Lucy whispered, stroking his thick fur with movements that had grown increasingly skilled and confident over the months. "Lucy loves Rex so much. Lucy, always take care of Rex, okay?" Sarah watched this interaction with a mixture of pride and wonder, understanding that she was witnessing her daughter's character being shaped by the extraordinary relationship she shared with Rex. Lucy was learning about loyalty, about the reciprocal nature of love, about the responsibility that came with caring for someone who had once cared for you. "She's learning things I never could have taught her," Sarah murmured to Johnson as they observed Lucy's gentle ministrations to Rex. "She's understanding what it means to love someone unconditionally, to put someone else's needs before your own, to be loyal even when it requires sacrifice." Johnson nodded, recognizing the profound lesson in character development that was taking place before their eyes. "Rex has been her teacher in more ways than we ever imagined. He's showing her what love looks like when it's lived out through actions rather than just words." Lucy had positioned herself so that Rex could rest his head in her lap, and she was now softly singing to him the same lullabies that Sarah had sung to her during their darkest days. Her sweet, childish voice filled the apartment with melodies that spoke of comfort, security, and the kind of love that endured through all circumstances. "Rex is Lucy's best friend in the whole world," Lucy announced to the room, her voice carrying the absolute conviction of someone stating an immutable truth. "Lucy will always, always take care of Rex, because that's what families do. Families take care of each other no matter what." The promise she was making went beyond the immediate care of an aging dog. Lucy was articulating an understanding of loyalty and commitment that would shape her character for the rest of her life. She was learning from Rex's example that love was not just a feeling, but a choice to remain faithful through changing circumstances, to provide care when it was needed, to be present for someone you loved, even when they could no longer provide the same level of care in return. "That's exactly right, sweetheart," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion as she watched her daughter demonstrate the kind of character that couldn't be taught through lectures or rules, but only through the lived example of unconditional love. "Families do take care of each other, and Rex will always be part of our family." As the evening wound down, and it came time for Lucy's bedtime routine, she insisted on helping Rex get comfortable in his bed beside hers, before she would consider getting ready for sleep herself. The sight of the little girl carefully arranging Rex's blankets, ensuring his water bowl was within reach, and giving him gentle goodnight kisses, demonstrated that the roles in their relationship had evolved into something beautifully reciprocal. "Sleep good, Rex," Lucy whispered as she finally climbed into her own bed. "Lucy right here if Rex needs anything. Lucy always take care of Rex." 6 months after their anniversary celebration, the ripple effects of Rex and Lucy's story continued to expand far beyond their immediate family, creating lasting changes that would impact countless lives for years to come. The Chicago Police Department had been so moved by the extraordinary therapeutic bond between Rex and Lucy that they had developed an entirely new program designed to train police dogs specifically for crisis intervention work with traumatized children. "Rex has shown us possibilities we never imagined," Superintendent Jackson explained during the press conference, announcing the new Canine Therapy Initiative. "We've always known that our dogs were capable of extraordinary things, But Rex's relationship with Lucy has demonstrated that police dogs can be healers as well as protectors, that they can bridge gaps between law enforcement and community members who need compassion as much as they need protection. The program had attracted national attention, with police departments from across the country sending representatives to Chicago to learn about the training methods and protocols that could help other canine units develop similar therapeutic capabilities. Rex himself had become something of a celebrity in law enforcement circles, his story inspiring a new understanding of what community policing could look like when officers and their partners approached their work with hearts as well as minds. The children's book that had emerged from their story, written by local author Maria Santos, with Lucy's enthusiastic input, had become a bestseller that was being read in elementary schools across the nation. Rex and Lucy, a story of love and second chances, had touched the hearts of children and adults alike, with its simple but profound message that families could be healed, that love could overcome even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes could provide exactly what was needed. Lucy helped write the book, the little girl would announce proudly to anyone who asked about the colorful volume that had become her most treasured possession. Lucy told the writer lady about how Rex saved Lucy's family, and now kids everywhere can learn about love and being brave. The book's success had led to speaking engagements for Sarah, who found herself traveling to conferences and community events to share their story of recovery and redemption. Her message resonated particularly with social workers, first responders, and family service organizations who recognized the importance of approaching family crises with compassion rather than judgment. The night Officer Johnson and Rex found me on that bridge, they didn't see a criminal who had abandoned her child, Sarah would tell audiences, her voice carrying the strength that came from having survived the unthinkable and emerged stronger. They saw a mother who had made a desperate choice out of love, and they responded with the kind of compassion that saved not just my life, but my daughter's future. That's the power of seeing people's hearts instead of just their circumstances. Lucy's own dreams had been profoundly shaped by her relationship with Rex and the understanding she had gained about the healing power of animals. At 4 years old, she had already announced her intention to become a veterinarian who specialized in helping therapy dogs learn to comfort people who were scared or sad. Lucy wants to help dogs help people, she would explain with the earnest conviction of someone who had discovered her life's calling. Dogs like Rex can make sad people happy and scared people brave. Lucy wants to teach more dogs how to do that. Her bedroom had become filled with stuffed animals that she practiced veterinary care on, and she had begun reading every book about dogs and animal care that she could find at the library. Sarah had enrolled Lucy in a junior naturalist program at the local zoo, where her natural empathy for animals and her understanding of their therapeutic potential had impressed instructors who were amazed by her maturity and insight. Rex himself seemed to understand that his story had become something larger than his individual experience. During visits to schools, hospitals, and community events, he displayed a patient dignity that suggested he recognized the importance of his role as an ambassador for the healing power of human-animal bonds. But it was in the quiet moments at home that Rex's greatest satisfaction was most evident. As spring arrived, and they prepared to celebrate Lucy's 5th birthday, the German Shepherd could often be found in their sunny apartment, surrounded by the sounds and scents of the family he had helped to heal and hold together. "Rex did it," Sarah would sometimes whisper to Johnson during his visits, watching as Rex and Lucy played gentle games together or settled down for their evening reading routine. He didn't just save Lucy's life that night. He saved our family's soul. He showed us what unconditional love looks like, and he gave us the foundation we needed to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of our lives. The final scene that would remain etched in the hearts of everyone who knew their story played out on a peaceful Sunday evening, their home with golden light. Lucy, now 5 years old and brimming with confidence and joy, had fallen asleep while reading to Rex, her small hand resting on his thick fur as they both dozed contentedly. Rex's graying muzzle rested on Lucy's pillow, his breathing deep and peaceful, with the satisfaction of a mission completed and a purpose fulfilled. In their sleep, both the little girl and the dog who had saved her seemed to be dreaming the same dream, of all the tomorrows they would share together, of the continued adventures and quiet moments and ordinary miracles that made up the extraordinary gift of family. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching over the two most important souls in her world, and felt a gratitude so profound it seemed to fill every corner of their small apartment with light. They had survived the impossible, overcome the unthinkable, and built a life so beautiful that sometimes she could hardly believe it was real. "Sweet dreams, my loves," she whispered to the sleeping pair. "Dream of all our tomorrows together." Outside, the city of Chicago continued its restless rhythm, filled with other families facing their own challenges, their own moments of despair and hope. But inside their warm apartment, Rex and Lucy slept peacefully, living proof that love could heal any wound, that second chances were always possible, and that sometimes the most broken hearts were capable of the strongest, most enduring love. Their story would continue, filled with ordinary moments and extraordinary love, a testament to the power of never giving up on family, on hope, and on the miraculous healing that was possible when hearts chose love over fear, compassion over judgment, and faith over despair. Rex and Lucy's journey reminds us why we fall so deeply in love with our four-legged companions. German shepherds, with their noble hearts and unwavering loyalty, show us what unconditional love truly looks like. But it's not just about the breed, it's about that sacred bond between human and dog that transcends words. Every dog has the capacity to be someone's Rex. Every wagging tail carries the potential for healing. Every gentle nuzzle holds the power to mend broken hearts. If Rex and Lucy's story touched something deep in your soul, you might find yourself wanting to strengthen that special connection with your own faithful friend. There's something beautiful about understanding your dog's heart language, those subtle signs of love and loyalty they share with us every single day. Sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin with a single step toward deeper understanding. Your dog is already your hero. Perhaps it's time to become theirs too. What story will you and your companion write together?